straight out of our Abuja studios now is to speak on top news headlines coming out of Nigeria and across the world this week is lecturer and public affairs analyst Sunday Adejoh. Sunday, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Good morning to you. Well, let's start with the issues around insurgency this week. Unfortunately, we are currently in the middle of a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has affected all areas of life and business. But sadly, or fortunately, I'm not even sure what word to use, it doesn't seem to have put any type of down on the seriousness of our problems with insurgency in the north of the country. What kind of effect do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has had on that? Before we ask you those questions, though, we do have a little soundbite that we'd like you to listen to, and then we'll come back to you after that.
Within the period under review, troops of Operation Lafia Dole put in a high professional effort with glaring success. Some villages that were under attack during the period were rescued by our gallant troops, and normalcy returned to the affected areas. Troops of Operation Hadarin Daji conducted various clearance operations during the period under review. The combined effort of the land and air components, as well as other security operatives of the operation, provided security for lives and properties. Several bandits' locations and hideouts were cleared with close air support provided for ground troops. In all, a total of 17 kidnapped victims were rescued and united with their families, and 146 bandits were neutralized in Katsina and Zamfara states.
Well, Sunday, I'm sure you just heard what the Major General had to say there. Again, I put the question to you. COVID-19 and the pandemic seem to have affected almost all areas of life, but not insurgency. How do you think that is the case, or do you agree that it has been affected by COVID-19, the issues with insurgency in our country?
Well, I don't think the COVID-19 issue has not affected insurgency and of course, the counter-insurgency operation in the Northeast. But like you have said, almost every sector, of the global system is affected by this pandemic. But however, the state has the responsibility to ensure that, her citizens are protected and their lives, are secured. And if the terrorists are not giving up, regardless of the whole, COVID-19 pandemic, then there's no how the armed forces will relax on their oars. And that is why, regardless of the whole pandemic, regardless of the crisis, the military are still, in the field, operating and ensure that, lives and properties of Nigerians are secured. The bandit does not care about COVID-19. The bandits are there, the terrorists are there trying to achieve their own objective. And as such, the military too, regardless of the whole, COVID-19 pandemic, are also not relaxing. And that is why we have recorded some, remarkable success. Looking at what Major General Nenche said a while ago, it tells you that the military is not relenting, and they are also making effort regardless, of the lockdown. We're in lockdown, but the military in the war front, in the front line, has no business with lockdown, because they must ensure that the territorial integrity of the country, is secured.
Indeed, you are absolutely correct that the military can't even afford to be on a lockdown, really. You talked about what the Paul Anenche said. Let me just quote him. Within the period under review, 18th to 5th March, troops of Operation Lafia Dole putting a high professional effort with glaring success. These are his words. Now, would you say the army is just blowing its trumpet, or they have taken a great leap in the fight against insurgency?
Well, I will not say that the army is blowing its trumpet, but even if that is the case, I do not see anything wrong, in blowing the trumpet. One thing we need to understand about counter-insurgency operations sometimes is the fact that the citizens need to see that the military is making effort. The citizens need to have an understanding of the degree of successes recorded by the military. And until the citizens have an idea that the military is recording some remarkable success, the citizens will not have a sense of security, they will not have a sense of fulfillment that the military is making effort to ensure that they are safeguarded. Just some couple of weeks ago, less than a month ago, there's a video going viral on the social media how the Chadian military were able to, bamboozle and bombarded the Boko Haram and, ISWAP terrorists around the Lake Chad Basin and somewhere in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And you could see, the applause our Nigerians gave to that effort recorded by the Chadian military. Imagine that they did not, release that into public domain. Nobody will be aware. That also raised a lot of criticism over the effort that our military are putting in as far as counterinsurgency operation is concerned. And so if the military is blowing its trumpet, like you said, I do not see anything wrong with that. It has a psychological, balance that it creates for citizens to understand and to recognize the effort, that the military is putting as far as counterinsurgency operation is concerned. Most often than not, you see the terrorists also utilizing cyberspace, to post and host videos of how they attack communities, how they attack military base, and it demoralizes the Nigerian citizen, demoralizes the military at the forefront. And so if the military now have recorded some degree of success and they need to bring it to the front burner for Nigerians to understand that we are not really relenting, we are not really on a lockdown, we are making effort. I don't see anything wrong with that, in my opinion.
All right.
Well, definitely, as you've mentioned in your answer there, the military has been making substantial gains. In fact, in the recent Operation Hadarin Daji, reports say that troops were able to kill 146 assailants, both in Katsina and Zamfara states. And in addition to that, several arms, ammunition, and millions of liters worth of oil products were also recovered from these assailants. If you could tell us a bit more about the supply lines to these groups, how are they able to have such an, what appears to be an extensive arsenal when it comes to weapon and access to so many oil products? How does that happen?
Okay, you see, one challenge that we have always had as far as security in Nigeria is concerned is the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And you now have illicit weapons in the hands of civilians, illicit weapons in the hands of people who should naturally not have business with weapons. And that is occasioned by the fact that we have porous borders, borders on all sides, from the Lake Chad area to the Niger area to the Cameroon area. We have a serious challenge as far as the porosity of our borders is concerned. And so people bring in illicit weapons from Libya through the Sahara Desert and all of that. And we now have this challenge. Without the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, we wouldn't find ourselves in this kind of security challenge that we have. There's an increase in armed robbery, increase in kidnapping, increase in militancy, increase in banditry, increase in terrorist activities because of the availability of illicit weapons. And until we begin to address this issue, then we're just going to be exposing our military, and extending the responsibility of the military. The first point of call must be that we must ensure that our borders are properly managed, our borders are properly manned. If it requires the use of geospatial intelligence, to manage these borders, then we're the giant of Africa. We should be able to key into, technology and scientific means to ensure that our borders are properly manned and we have area surveillance of our border. That will help us to address the issue, of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And apart from this issue of small arms and light weapons, is also the fact that majority of our territory, serious parts of our territory, are unmanned. There are places you go to, you cannot find a single police officer, you cannot find a single soldier, you cannot find a single law enforcement agent, because of the vast nature of our territory. And so we must begin to address the remote and immediate precipitators, for the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, address issue of poverty, address issue of unemployment, address issue of illiteracy, and this will naturally help, to bring, to bring down the rate at which we are encountering such insecurity in our country.
Well, Sunday, I was going to follow up on what you talked about psychology, but I'll hold that, and let me drive the point of the army claiming that they killed 146 bandits in Katsina. As sweet as this is to the ears, as information might be, can you help, us make sense of the fact that we do not particularly hear of arrest and prosecution? One should get a sense that the people who are perpetrating these dastardly acts are brought to book.
Well, I think one challenge we have had in Nigeria has also been the nature of our judicial system and, the whole bureaucracy associated with prosecution. It's a serious issue that we need to look into. It is one thing to arrest the bandits. It is another thing to, to ensure that they are prosecuted and they serve the necessary years or terms that they are supposed to spend in jail. But like you have rightly observed, we are not seeing all of these issues. Recently, you must have noticed that we have been having a lot of, governors, pardoning prisoners under the prerogative of mercy because our prisons are, are overcrowded. There are people who have been in prison for over 10 years, 15 years, still awaiting trial. And so it makes a mess and a caricature of our judicial system. It is not the state government who should prosecute a bandit, neither is the duty of the military
Sunday,
or the duty of the
I'm going to have put you on pause. We'll get back in a bit and you will continue exactly where you stopped, and then probably we'll go to the psychological question I was going to ask you about. You're still watching the morning show. We'll be back in a bit with more. Don't go away. We're glad to have you back. You're still watching the morning show. We have a lecturer and a public analyst, Sunday Adejoh, who was a school seeing on the question of arrest and prosecution of these bandits when they are caught, if they are caught. I'll have you continue from there, but just add that to this, add this to that, if you will remember the question of how much of a psychological boost will this victory be for the army, and to what extent will it affect the insurgents' resolve?
Okay, fine. Like I was saying that the issue of prosecuting bandits is not the responsibility of the Nigerian military, neither is it the responsibility of other security agents. Their duty is to ensure that these guys are arrested and, of course, sent to necessary quarters, which is the judicial system, to ensure that they are prosecuted. And we are not seeing cases of prosecution because of the nature of our judicial system. The bureaucracy, the whole delays within the judicial system is a serious matter for concern. And that accounts for why, our prisons are overcrowded, because there are a lot of people who have been in prison and they are waiting trial for over 10 and 15 years. And it doesn't really help. It doesn't also, of course, boost the morale of those at the front line, who made effort, ensure that these guys are arrested, and the necessary punishment that should go with such offenses is not being meted out on these guys. It doesn't augur well and it doesn't speak well. We also have a law against terrorism in Nigeria. How many terrorists have been sentenced? There's hardly a case. Sometimes we even have cases of some of these guys, challenging the judicial system, for unnecessarily detaining them. Now that is that. With regards to the issue of psychology and, of course, the effort of the Nigerian military, one cannot really overemphasize, the degree at which these help to boost the morality of those at the front line, and of course also build the confidence of Nigerians as far as the military is concerned. Terrorism has a psychological dimension, and that is why more often than not, when Boko Haram records any success, they try to upload these in the social media to, to show Nigerians and the global system that they are really achieving success. And that helps to demoralize the Nigerian people. It helps to demoralize the Nigerian military. It also helps to print Nigeria in negative light. And so if the military is also recording success, there's a need for them to also employ the same strategy, show Nigerians the degree of success they have achieved, and that, of course, will help Nigerians to continue to have, more confidence in her military.
When it comes to conflict and war and fights, you'd like to think that there would definitely, surely be some type of plan in place of how we're going to attack this enemy, the funds needed, the supplies that we need, but also a time frame. I'd like to think that there's also specific time the Nigerian military have put aside to be able to successfully tackle this war on insurgency. So I'd like to ask you a bit more on what you think the Nigerian military's exit strategy is. And if we do have one, is there any type of end in sight, or will we be fighting this war indefinitely?
Very important question. I do not think that there is a timeline where we are looking at ensuring that this whole, threat of terrorism, will be completely wiped out in Nigeria for different reasons. Countries are supposed to have plans, and plans are supposed to be tied to time and period, be it a short-time plan, a medium plan, or a long-time plan. But of course, the whole activity is not exclusively a military issue, and that's one angle that we are getting it wrong. The military has a role to play in counter-terrorism operation, especially when it comes to the use of kinetic strategies and all of that to ensure that terrorism is countered. But if you look at the factors responsible for the upsurge of terrorism, it has a lot to do with the social economic condition of the terrain of the northeastern part of Nigeria, where we have, that is the force of gravity of terrorism. If the government wants to ensure that terrorism is completely addressed, then all eyes would not be on the military. We must begin to address issues of poverty in the northeast, issues of illiteracy in the northeast, issues of unemployment. And we must also begin to address the issue of radicalization, especially as used by some Islamic clerics and the terrorists, of course, to also brainwash people into accepting terrorist ideology. If the military is able to wipe out the entire insurgents in the northeast, and the ideology of people in the northeast is not changed, then the Boko Haram guys will continue to recruit people. For over how many years the military has been recording remarkable effort? How comes the population of the terrorists is not diminishing? It means that there are still issues of recruitment, and one way we can counter insurgency is to ensure that recruitment of new people into the insurgent group is completely addressed. And to address the issue of recruitment, we must address the issue of poverty, we must address the issue of unemployment. You need to take a look at the population of the young people in the IDP camps. These are vulnerable people and potential recruits, for the terrorists. Until we change their economic and social condition, then the northeast remains a vital ground for terrorism. And that is not the responsibility of the military to do. It is the responsibility of the federal government in collaboration with every agency that has the responsibility to ensure that Nigerians enjoy the dividends of good governance and that poverty is eradicated in our country.
Out there, especially the NOS, still talking on a strategy. This banditry insurgency, I mean, they've insisted. We keep on hearing about, bandits wasting lives. Sometimes you have 40, more than 40, and what have you. Now, one can't help but wonder, Sunday, is it a question of skewed strategy, or is it not enough personnel to track and curtail their escapades? You talked about the fact that in some areas there are not enough, of the security agencies to man those positions, or that the authorities do not care enough, really, for the lives being lost. Which is it?
Well, there's no straight-jacketed approach to this issue, as the factors responsible for this whole crisis is multifaceted and multidimensional. And so we have to look at this issue holistically. Yes, Nigeria, the size of this country is quite massive. Yes, the number of security, the population of our security agents compared to the population of Nigeria, that's about 200 million, is grossly inadequate. And so we need to increase the issue of manpower as far as security agents are concerned. And apart from that, like I said, we need to employ the use of science and technology. There is no how we can have men of the Nigerian security agents man all our borders. And like I said, because these borders are porous, it has given room, for the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. Then is the issue of poverty. If people are poor, if people are unemployed, there's a tendency for them to want to take into arms, get arms and begin to use illicit means to ensure that, their economic interest, is achieved. We have a lot to do in our hands, and one mistake we have always made as a country is that sometimes at the initial stage of all this crisis, we treat them with gloved hands, and when it gets out of hand, we begin to put in more effort, and sometimes it becomes more difficult to address. All these issues have remote and immediate causes. And we must address these remote and immediate causes if we want to ensure, a lasting solution to the issue of banditry, to the issue of kidnapping and all of that. The Kaduna-Abuja highway, sometimes around last year and early this year, was a death trap for people who travel around that route. Indeed. The northwestern part of Nigeria has been a very serious area where these bandits, are operating. In Kaduna, in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Sokoto, and all of that. There's a similarity in characteristics of this region. And until these similarities are addressed, then we may likely continue to, to face this challenge of banditry.
Well, thank you very much, Sunday. That was a fantastic answer. Yeah. I want to shift the conversation a little and look at Sani Abacha now and the repatriated stolen money that's making its way back into Nigeria. It's $311 million worth of money there. And I'm sure you would have heard me just say it was stolen money, but a lot of people within Nigeria haven't used that same rhetoric. In fact, we had Nigeria's Attorney General of the Federation, as you know, Abubakar Malami, and he referred to this money as Abacha assets. His senior advisor on media and public affairs also referred to the money as alleged stolen funds. What do you think is the issue with the rhetoric here? Why aren't these people using the correct terms to describe this money?
That's one challenge with Nigeria. Sometimes we try to... spade is spade. We try to garnish it. We try to, baptize it and, give it a different name. There's nothing like if you call it Abacha loot. This is money belonging to Nigerians, exactly, stolen by our former military head of state. And so there's no point garnishing it. Sometimes they call it Abacha 3, Abacha loot, Abacha asset. It doesn't make sense. This is a matter of semantics, and if we want to be serious, we must call a spade, so you don't encourage people that when people are involved in criminal activity, you want to change the name, you want to rebaptize the name and call it something else. It is stolen money, and it should be addressed as such. This is our money stolen by Abacha, and this money is being repatriated. If it's an asset, the asset should be given to his family. Why is it being repatriated to Nigeria and sent into the account, into an account in the Central Bank of Nigeria? That is a clear manifestation that it is our money, and the money was stolen, and the money has been brought back to Nigeria.
It's actually in the Central Bank. Actually, it has accrued interest. He did explain, well, I still wanted to go back to the military, before we'll get back here to Abacha, because there's something very important. I'm going to drop it. We may not have time for you to answer it, but you're going to come back and answer it before I delve into the Abacha loot, Abacha assets, whatever it is. There's this non-payment of salaries to the armed forces and security agents as a result of the incompetence. That's what is being said. Incompetence and inexperience of the operators of the EPs, and this definitely, Sunday, is a distraction. I'm sure you'll agree with me. Some actually have gone as far as calling on the government to treat the armed forces the same way they are treating the DSS and the NIA. What's your sense? I don't know whether you have time to answer it, but you could start. If you don't have time to answer it, we will take a break. And when I get back, if you don't remember, I'll remind you, and then you will do justice to that particular question. You're still watching The Morning Show. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us.
Well, welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. We are still joined by lecturer and public affairs analyst Sunday Adejoh. Before we went on break, my colleague Indi was asking you a question also on the issue with insurgency. Do you remember what he said, or should we refresh your memory?
I remember what he said.
Good.
Go ahead.
Go on.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think that is not a good signal coming from the Accountant General. The Accountant General is responsible for the whole IPs and, of course, salaries of public servants. And if those at the front line are not being paid their salaries as at when due, that is diminishing their morale. The military is an institution where morale is very important. And so if you want result, you must continue to boost their morale. And, of course, it is not as though it is something they've not worked for. It is their money. A laborer deserves his wages, not just his wages. Such wage or wages must be paid as at when due. Today is 10th of May, and if people at the front line have not been paid, that is not a good signal. I think the Accountant General need to wake up and ensure that these guys are paid, because if they are not paid and their morale is brought down, we're all going to have our own fair share of this lack of morale. It doesn't speak well of the Accountant General that on the 10th of another month, people who are at the front line have not been paid. I think a directive should be given to the Accountant General to ensure that the military are spontaneously, paid their salaries. They have also families they need to feed.
Yeah,
there are families that have left behind. They need to give them money to take care of themselves.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, the complaint was that some of the soldiers tried to sign checks, and they can't, no money's in their banks. And so it's a very tough situation for this to be occurring at this point. All right, let's go on to what my colleague raised, the issue she raised about the Abacha assets, Abacha loot, whatever one wants to call it. I think it's a question of semantics, really. So what's your take on the assertion that the return of Abacha's loot now assets is a testament to the growing and deepening relationship between the country of Nigeria and that of the U.S.? And how can Nigeria begin to cut this relationship going forward for further dividends?
Well, I think, international relations requires a lot of, utilization of diplomacy if you must ensure that your national interest, is protected, projected, and, of course, promoted. And so we have seen results, coming out as far as Nigerian-U.S. relation is concerned, even though it doesn't put Nigeria in good light, because the whole refund of about $311 million is not in a good light, because it is money stolen from Nigeria. If we want to promote our diplomatic relation and our national interest, it must be on issues that are of germane, importance to Nigeria. What is the U.S. contribution to, for instance, the fight against terrorism in Nigeria? These are issues we should be looking at. These are issues that diplomacy should be able to, help us achieve. But of course, economic diplomacy, of course, is also very important. And because of this relationship that, that the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration enjoys with the U.S., we have seen that results are beginning to come up. But we must ensure that such relationship is sustained, that we must ensure that this fund that has been returned is judiciously utilized. It is one thing to refund this money. It is another thing to ensure that this money is not reluted. Sometimes in Nigeria, some money of such are refunded, and we end up reluting this money, internally within the political system. The government must ensure that we must ensure that this money is properly utilized. The project that these monies are meant for, they say they want to use the money for the second Niger Bridge, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and of course the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Expressway. The world needs to see the government utilizing this money judiciously. But where I also have issue is the fact that the government needs to come out to tell Nigerians whether or not these monies will be able to complete this project, and at what phase can this money take this project up to. And so Nigerians will begin to look up to government to say, courtesy of the Abacha loot that was refunded, that was repatriated, you said we were going to complete the second Niger bridge. At the end of the day, have you completed the second Niger bridge? Have you completed the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway? Sometimes we come up with blanket statements, and it becomes difficult for people to hold on to the government on certain issues that the government has to say. Though interestingly, the government has said that civil societies are going to be part of the process monitoring, the implementation of this project. But let's see how it goes. I think that leaves more to be admired. Let's see what happens maybe at the end of this whole COVID-19 pandemic, when these monies will now be put into use.
Well, Sunday, I wanted to ask you, I mean, it's no secret that this isn't the first time money that was stolen by Abacha has been repatriated back to Nigeria, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be the last. There are reports that there are still monies in different parts of the world. What do you think this says about the state of corruption in Nigeria's highest ranks? For decades, we've had a tarnish or a stain, rather, on our reputation of condoning so much corruption. What do you think instances like this do to that stereotype of Nigeria having such a close relationship to corruption?
Well, I like the word stereotype, but you see, sometimes these stereotypes are justified. The unimaginable rate of corruption in Nigeria, especially within top-ranked government officials, is something that has not presented Nigeria in the positive light as far as the Committee of Nations is concerned. And like you said correctly, that this is not the first time we are having money stolen by Abacha being repatriated, and this will not be the last time money stolen by Abacha will be repatriated into Nigeria. But of course, all these monies by just one individual in barely less than 4 years, he was able to steal this kind of money. It's really unimaginable. But be that as it may, we need to begin to work towards, revitalizing, reclaiming our identity, purging and purifying our identity as a people and as a country, where that tag of corruption has become permanently affixed to us. A lot needs to be done, and the executive and the judiciary, has serious role to play as far as this is concerned. One issue that dominated discourse in the last week is the ruling of the Supreme Court in relation to Orji Uzor Kalu, and a lot of Nigerians are beginning to wonder if a case has been in court for over 12 years and eventually the EFCC has achieved some degree of success, and for some issues of technicality, the Supreme Court is taking us back, asking for a retrial. I think it doesn't really present Nigeria in a good light. Issues of corruption must be expressly dealt with, and it will show the international community that we are serious about our fight against corruption in Nigeria.
All right, Sunday, let's discuss elections now. INEC, the body, the electoral umpire, is assuring the nation that it will go ahead with the Edo State and Ondo State elections fixed for the 19th of September and then, of course, 10th of October, respectively. Now, a few countries, one must say, have succeeded in conducting elections. We can mention South Korea, you can mention Mali, our African neighbors here, and, of course, you can mention the U.S., Wisconsin particularly. So, for INEC, what challenges come to mind?
Well, there are a lot of challenges INEC has got to grapple with. There are a lot of challenges the politicians and the political parties are going to grapple with if these elections must be conducted. Yes, you have given examples of countries where they were able to conduct election, but we must not disregard the uniqueness of our own political system, the uniqueness of our own political behavior and political culture, and how these, may affect the electoral process. We are still, in the midst of this pandemic. The rate is getting exponentially high. In less than 2 weeks, in fact, less than 1 week after we have eased lockdown in Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun, we have seen how spontaneous the rate has gone. And so if you want to conduct elections, don't you think that this will further give room, for more contact, for more social relations that will eventually increase the rate, of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are grappling with? I think if INEC wants to go ahead with the election, then there will be a need for INEC to have, an interaction or a synergy with the Center for Disease Control, the Ministry of Health, and see what possible guidelines, what possible modus operandi can be drafted that will be unique to the social reality of the country. I know naturally, according to Section 99, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act, electoral seasons are supposed to commence 3 months before the election, and of course campaign should end 24 hours before the day of the election. But what kind of politician in the midst of all this crisis will have the mindset to go out and begin to campaign door to door to people, telling them about why they need to vote for him when the country is still ravaged with COVID-19? But of course, let's see how things unfold. INEC cannot do that without consultation with the Center for Disease Control. They need expert advice on the feasibility or otherwise of the forthcoming election.
Well, they've also put a few plans in place. INEC allegedly have barred staff over the age of 58, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and all other staff with any type of underlying health condition. Do you think that this is enough, or do you think the rewards for going ahead as planned outweigh the risks in this situation here? Is it wise for this to still go ahead as planned?
I don't think it is wise to go ahead with the plan to conduct elections in September and in October, considering the social reality of our country, especially noting the fact that the rate at which the disease is spreading in Nigeria is becoming alarming, and it raises cause, for concern. But like I said, I am not an expert in science, neither am I an expert in parasitology and all of that. There's a need for INEC to consult the Center for Disease Control and not to be so much interested in conducting election while putting the lives of people at risk. All these factors need to be taken into consideration.
Okay.
All right. We've been discussing with a public affairs analyst there and a lecturer, Sunday Adejoh. Thank you so much for being on the morning show.